Commander Sci floated in his control chair aboard the patrol ship Gentle Current. His thin, almost transparent body glowed softly blue as he reviewed the morning reports. The Zephyrian had been guarding this section of space for 12 years, and nothing interesting had ever happened. That was exactly how he liked it. The galaxy had been peaceful for 3,000 years. 7 different alien species lived together in harmony. They traded goods, shared knowledge, and solved problems through careful discussion. War was something from the old history books. Something barbaric that civilized beings had left behind long ago. The Zephyrians, like Sci, were creatures of pure energy wrapped in delicate crystalline shells. They could float through air and space with equal ease. The Zerathi looked like living gems, their bodies made of colored crystal that rang like bells when they spoke. The Nalarians lived underwater on their ocean worlds, breathing through gills and speaking in songs that could travel across entire seas. The insect-like Cathera worked as one giant mind, sharing thoughts across their entire species. People called Verdani grew slowly, but lived for thousands of years, their bark-like skin changing colors with their moods. The Luminor were beings made of pure light, who could only be seen when they wanted to be. The Quiloth looked like large frogs, but were some of the smartest creatures in the galaxy. All of these species worked together in the Galactic Council. They met on the beautiful world of Nexus Prime, where representatives from each species made decisions that affected trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. It was a system that had worked perfectly for longer than most civilizations had existed. Sci was thinking about how boring his job was when the first emergency signal reached his ship. His communications officer, a young Zephyrian named Velen, turned toward him with confusion glowing from his crystalline face. Commander Velen said, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We have received a distress call from the cargo ship Crystal Song, but the message cuts off halfway through." Sci drifted over to the communications station. "Play the message," he ordered. The voice of Captain Murdell, a Zerathi trader, came through clearly at first. "This is the Crystal Song requesting immediate assistance. We have detected something unusual in the Kepler 442 system. Our sensors are showing readings that do not make sense. We are moving closer to investigate and will report back in 6 hours." Then there was silence. Not static, not interference, just complete, total silence. "When was this message sent?" Sci asked. 18 hours ago, Commander. They should have reported back 12 hours ago." Sci felt a chill run through his energy form. In all his years of service, he had never encountered a situation where a ship simply stopped communicating. Ships broke down, yes. They had accidents, they got lost, they had equipment failures, but they always sent some kind of message first. "Send a probe to their last known location," he ordered, "and contact Council headquarters. They need to know about this." While they waited for the probe to reach Kepler 442, more reports began arriving. A Nalarian research vessel had gone silent near the Vega system. Cathara mining operation had stopped responding to hive mind communications. A Verdane colony ship was 12 days overdue. Each report followed the same pattern. Normal communications, then nothing. No distress calls, no emergency beacons, no final messages. The ships and their crews had simply vanished. The probe finally reached the location where the Crystal Song had been investigating. What it found made Zex's crystalline shell crack with shock. The entire star system was empty. Not just empty of ships, but empty of everything. The planets were still there, but they looked wrong. Their surfaces were gray and lifeless, their atmospheres stripped away, their oceans gone. "This is impossible," Velon whispered. "A star system cannot just die like this. It takes billions of years for planets to lose their atmospheres." But the probe's data was clear. 3 planets that had been lush and green just weeks ago were now dead rocks floating in space. Whatever had happened here had been fast, thorough, and completely devastating. Sci immediately sent a priority message to Nexus Prime. Within hours, similar reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. The disappearances were not random. They formed a pattern. a growing sphere of emptiness that was expanding outward from the galaxy's edge. Dr. Kailana, the Council's chief scientist who studied alien life, was a Verdani whose bark-like skin had turned deep purple with worry. Stood in the Council's emergency meeting room, surrounded by floating displays showing the missing ships and dead systems. "The pattern is clear," she said, her voice rustling like leaves in autumn wind. "Something is moving through our galaxy. In a systematic way, it is not random destruction. It is methodical, planned, and extremely efficient." The Luminar representative, a being of pure light named Brightstar, pulsed with rapid flashes of concern. The energy readings from the affected systems show complete drain. Not just the destruction of life, but the removal of all energy from entire worlds. This suggests technology beyond anything we understand. Elder Morden of the Verdani, whose ancient bark showed the wisdom of 3,000 years, spoke slowly. "In all my time, through all the wars of the past, I have never seen anything like this. Even our ancestors' most terrible weapons left something behind. This leaves nothing but empty shells." The Quiloth representative, Admiral Curlin, croaked, his concerns from his water-filled speaking tank. "Our combined fleets include over 10,000 ships. We have weapons that can crack planets and shields that can stop stars. How can we be facing something that makes entire star systems disappear?" For the first time in centuries, real fear filled the council chambers. These were species that had mastered space travel, conquered death, and solved the problems of war and hunger. They had built a civilization that spanned thousands of worlds and included trillions of beings. They thought they had seen everything the universe could throw at them, but now they were facing something that operated beyond their understanding, something that consumed entire worlds, not for resources or territory, but for reasons they could not even begin to guess. As the meeting continued late into the night, more reports arrived. 15 more systems had gone silent. The pattern was accelerating. Whatever was out there was moving faster now, growing stronger, becoming more efficient at its terrible work. Commander Zexai, monitoring the reports from his patrol ship, watched. As the map of missing systems grew larger, the empty zone now covered dozens of star systems. At this rate, it would reach the core worlds within months. He thought about his people, the peaceful Zephyrians, who had not fought a war in over 2,000 years. He thought about the beautiful crystal cities of the Zerathi, the underwater gardens of the Nilarians, the vast forests where the Verdani grew their young. All of it could be gone within a year. The galaxy's greatest minds were working around the clock to understand their enemy. But every theory they developed crumbled. When faced with the evidence, the thing destroying their worlds did not follow. Any scientific principles they knew seemed to exist partially outside normal space, appearing and disappearing at will. Some called it a weapon built by an unknown enemy. Others thought it might be a natural disaster, some kind of space storm they had never encountered before. Few suggested it might be something alive, a creature so vast and alien that they could not recognize it as life, but as more systems. Fell silent, and the sphere of destruction continued to grow. One terrible truth became clear to everyone in the galaxy. They were not equipped to fight something like this. Their peaceful civilization, built on cooperation and understanding, had no defenses against an enemy that showed no interest in communication or negotiation. The age of peace was ending. The silence was coming for them all. Captain Veltar of the Kithara Hive fleet stood on the bridge of his ship, unity of purpose, and felt the thoughts of 1 billion of his kind flowing through his insect-like mind. The Kethara shared everything with each other. Every thought, every feeling, every piece of information was instantly known by all members of their species. This had always been their greatest strength. Now, it felt like a curse, through the hive mind. Veltar could feel the terror of every Kethara in the galaxy as they watched their worlds die one by one. The fear was so strong that some of his people had chosen to cut themselves off from the shared mind rather than experience the constant horror. This had never happened before in Kethara history. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency council meeting. In that time, 47 star systems had gone completely silent. The thing that was destroying them moved like a plague across the galaxy, leaving nothing but empty, lifeless worlds behind. The Council had given Veltar command of the largest military force ever assembled. 200 ships from all 7 species flew together toward the Kepler 442 system, where the enemy had been detected by long-range sensors. It was the first time they had managed to track the destroyer to a specific location before it moved. "On all ships, report ready, Captain," said his second-in-command, a Cathera warrior named Zekon. Through the hive mind, Veltar could feel the nervousness of every crew member across the entire fleet. Even the normally calm Zephyrians were radiating anxiety through their crystalline shells. "Take us out of warp," Veltar ordered. "All ships, prepare for combat." The fleet dropped back into normal space at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. What they saw there made every being in the fleet stop and stare in horror. The system's 3 planets hung in space like broken eggs. Their surfaces were cracked and gray, split open to reveal empty cores where molten rock should have been. The planets looked like they had been sucked dry from the inside, leaving only hollow shells floating in the darkness. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what floated between the dead worlds. It was impossible to describe what they were seeing. The thing existed partly in normal space and partly somewhere else entirely. When it was visible, it looked like a massive cloud of dark energy that twisted and writhed like a living thing. Tendrils of shadow reached out from its core, touching the dead planets and seeming to drink something from them that their instruments could not measure. "What are our sensors telling us?" Velta asked, though through the hive mind he already knew the answer from his technical crew. "Nothing useful, Captain," Zekon replied. "The entity appears to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Our weapons systems cannot get a solid lock on it. Energy readings are off the charts, but they do not match any known power source." As they watched, the shadow thing seemed to notice their presence. It turned toward them, and every being in the fleet felt a chill of pure terror. Looking at it was like staring into the emptiness between stars, but worse. This darkness had intelligence behind it, and that intelligence was ancient, hungry, and completely alien. The creature began to move toward them. It did not fly like a ship or drift like a space creature. Instead, it seemed to fold space around itself, appearing closer with each moment that passed. "All ships, open fire," Veltar ordered. The combined fleet unleashed everything they had. Energy beams from Zephyrian ships that could cut through asteroid belts, crystal projectiles from Zerathi vessels that could punch through any known armor, sonic weapons from the Nalarians that could shatter mountains, plasma bolts from Kithara warships that burned hotter than stars. None of it worked. The weapons passed right through the shadow creature as if it was not really there. When they did manage to hit something solid, the creature simply absorbed the energy and seemed to grow stronger. The dark tendrils reached out further, and Veltar realized with growing horror that they were heading straight for his ships. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "All ships scatter." But it was already too late for some of them. The shadow tendrils touched 3 ships at the edge of the formation. What happened next would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The ships did not explode. They did not break apart. Instead, they began to dim. The lights went out first, then the engine glow faded, and finally the ships themselves became gray and lifeless. Through the hive mind, Veltar felt the Cathara crew members on those ships simply stop thinking. They were not dead exactly, but they were no longer alive either. "Fall back," Veltar ordered. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance." The fleet pulled back, but the shadow creature did not pursue them. Instead, it seemed to lose interest, turning back to the dead planets, to continue whatever terrible feeding it was doing. Veltar watched in sick fascination as the creature's tendrils caressed the empty worlds, drawing out the last traces of whatever energy remained through his communication system. Veltar could hear the voices of his fellow captains from the other species. The Zephyrian commander was speaking in rapid, panicked tones. The Zerathi captain's crystal voice was cracking with fear. Even the ancient Verdani admiral was rustling with distress. "It is not a weapon," whispered Dr. Falana, the Luminar scientist who had joined the mission. Her light form flickered with uncertainty. It is not a ship or a machine. It is something alive, but not life as we understand it. Then how do we fight it? Asked Captain Moreland of the Quloth destroyer Deep Current. No one had an answer. They tried everything over the next 6 hours. Different types of weapons, coordinated attacks, attempts to disrupt whatever energy the creature was feeding on. Nothing worked. The shadow thing continued its feeding, occasionally swatting at their attacks like an annoyed animal dealing with flying insects. When it finished draining the last planet, the creature simply vanished. It folded space around itself and disappeared, leaving behind 3 completely dead worlds and a fleet of 200 ships that had been reduced to helpless observers. Of the original fleet, only 167 ships made it back. 2 Nexus Prime. 33 vessels had been touched by the shadow tendrils and were now floating empty hulks. Their crews were still alive, but they sat motionless at their stations. Staring into nothing with empty eyes, the medical teams that examined the affected crew members found something that chilled them to the bone. The victims were not injured or poisoned. They had simply been drained of something essential, something that the galaxy's most advanced medicine could not identify or replace. In the council chambers, Voltar gave his report to a room full of terrified representatives. The shadow creature was not just destroying their worlds. It was feeding on them, consuming some kind of energy that was fundamental to life itself. It showed no interest in communication, Veltar said, his insect voice clicking with exhaustion. It did not respond to our presence except to defend itself when we attacked. Treats us like we might treat bacteria in a petri dish. We are simply resources to be consumed. Elder Morden of the Verdani spoke the words that everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say. We are facing something that is to us what we are to the microbes in the soil. It operates on a level of existence that we cannot even comprehend, much less fight against. The Luminor representative Brightstar pulsed with dim, defeated light. Our greatest weapons are useless. Our most advanced technology cannot even properly detect it. How does a civilization fight an enemy that exists beyond the very concepts of physics and biology that define our understanding of reality? Dr. Kylona had spent the week since the first disappearances studying every piece of data they had collected about the shadow creature. Her bark-like skin was now almost black with stress and lack of rest. I'd have analyzed the energy patterns from every encounter, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The entity appears to exist primarily in a dimension parallel to our own. It phases into our reality only when it needs to feed. Our weapons cannot touch it because they are designed to work in 3-dimensional space, while this creature operates in at least 7 dimensions that we can detect. Are you saying it is invincible? Asked Admiral Curlin of the Quloth. I am saying that we would need to completely rewrite our understanding of physics to even begin to develop weapons that could affect it. That would take decades, maybe centuries. At its current rate of consumption, the creature will have devoured half the galaxy within 2 years. The silence that followed her words was complete and terrible. Every representative in the chamber understood what she was telling them. Their advanced civilization, with all its knowledge and technology, was as helpless against this enemy as primitive animals would be against a starship. Outside the chamber windows, the lights of Nexus Prime twinkled peacefully in the night. But everyone in that room knew that this peace was an illusion. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the shadow creature was moving toward them, consuming world after world, growing stronger with each feeding. The age of the Galactic Council was coming to an end, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Admiral Curlin floated in his water tank in the Council's emergency session room, watching the holographic display that showed the growing zone of destruction. Red dots marked every system that had gone silent. The pattern was clear and terrifying. In just 2 months, over 100 star systems had been consumed by the shadow creature. The representatives of the 7 species sat around the circular chamber, but the usual harmony was gone. Fear had replaced cooperation. Some species were already talking about evacuation plans, abandoning their outer colonies to retreat toward the galactic core. We cannot run forever, Curlin said, his throat sac expanding as he spoke. At its current pace, this entity will consume the entire galaxy within 5 years. There will be nowhere left to hide. Scifi representative, a crystal being, named Hanil, chimed with desperation. Then what do you suggest, Admiral? Our greatest fleet was useless against it. Our weapons pass through it like it is made of air. Our scientists say it exists in dimensions we cannot even detect properly. Dr. Kailana had not slept in weeks. Her bark-like skin was cracked and dry, and her usually bright green color had faded to a sickly brown. She'd been studying every piece of data about the shadow creature, looking for any weakness they could exploit. I've been reviewing the ancient archives, she said slowly. Records from before the formation of the Galactic Council, when our species were still exploring and mapping the galaxy. Commander Zexai, who had been monitoring the outer regions where the attacks first began, drifted forward in his energy form. What did you find, Doctor? There are regions of space that we marked as forbidden zones thousands of years ago, Kailana continued. Areas beyond the galactic rim, where space itself behaves differently. Our ancestors sent exploration ships to these regions, but most never returned. The few that did come back brought reports of impossible worlds and dangerous life forms. The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. The forbidden zones were legendary among all the galactic species. They were places where the laws of physics seemed to bend and break, where gravitational forces did impossible things, where matter and energy behaved in ways that made no scientific sense. You are suggesting we venture into the death zones, said Brightstar, the Luminar representative. Her light form flickered with disbelief. Those regions have been forbidden for good reason. The reports from our ancestors speak of worlds where the very air burns with radiation, where gravity changes direction without warning, where life exists in forms too violent and chaotic for civilized beings to survive. I am not suggesting we colonize these regions, Kailana replied. I am suggesting we search them for anything that might help us understand or fight this shadow creature. If there are life forms that can survive in conditions that would kill us instantly, perhaps they have developed ways of existing that we have never imagined. Elder Morden, the ancient Verdani, whose bark showed the rings of 3,000 years of growth, rustled thoughtfully. The old records speak of worlds where creatures evolve not just to survive extreme conditions, but to thrive in them. Beings that exist in multiple dimensions, that feed on pure energy, that can manipulate the fabric of space itself. Admiral Curlin felt a chill in his water tank. You think the shadow creature might have come from these forbidden regions? It is possible, Kailana said. But more importantly, if such dangerous regions exist, they might also contain life forms that have learned to defend against entities, like our enemy. The debate that followed lasted for 12 hours. Many representatives argued that venturing into the forbidden zones was suicide. The Zephyrians worried that their delicate energy forms would not survive in chaotic space. Scifi feared that unstable physics would shatter their crystal bodies. The Nalarians pointed out that they're water-based. Biology would be useless on worlds with impossible atmospheric conditions. But as more reports arrived of systems falling silent, desperation began to override caution. The Kepler 438 system, home to a Verdani colony of 50 million tree people, had gone dark during the night. The shadow creature was accelerating its consumption, growing stronger with each feeding. Finally, Commander Zexai spoke the words that changed everything. We are already dying, he said simply. Our civilization, our people, our entire way of life will be extinct within 5 years if we do nothing. At least this way we die trying to fight back. The vote was closer than any in Council history, but it passed. It would send an expedition to the Forbidden Zones, searching for any knowledge or allies that might help them against the shadow creature. Admiral Carolyn volunteered to lead the mission. The ship chosen for the journey was Harmony's Edge, a vessel designed for deep space exploration with the most advanced shields and engines the Council could provide. The crew included the finest scientists and warriors from all 7 species, volunteers who understood they were probably going to die. Dr. Kailana insisted on joining the mission, despite her age and fragile condition. If we find something in those regions, she said, we will need someone who understands what we are looking for. The launch ceremony was held in orbit around Nexus Prime. Millions of beings from across the galaxy watched as the single ship prepared to venture beyond the edge of known space. Many knew they might never see these brave souls again. As the ship's captain, an experienced Quilloth explorer named Belron initiated the jump to hyperspace. The crew settled in for a journey that would take them months to complete. They were heading for a cluster of star systems that had been marked on the oldest star charts, with warnings written in every galactic language. The journey through hyperspace was normal at first, but as they approached the galactic rim, strange things began to happen. Their instruments started giving impossible readings. The hyperspace tunnel around them began to twist and change colors. Sometimes the ship shook for no reason their sensors could detect. "We are entering regions where space-time is unstable," reported Dr. Valine, the mission's lead physicist. "The mathematics that govern hyperspace travel begin to break down out here. We may need to drop back to normal space earlier than planned." 3 weeks into their journey, they were forced to exit hyperspace when their navigation computers began displaying error messages in languages that did not exist. The ship drifted back into normal space in a region that their star charts showed as empty void, but it was not empty. In front of them was a star system that should not have been able to exist. The central star was burning with colors that hurt to look at directly, around it orbited planets that seemed to move in patterns that defied orbital mechanics. One world spun so fast it should have torn itself apart, yet somehow remained intact. Another seemed to be in 2 places at once, existing as overlapping images that made their sensors scream warnings. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Valine. "The gravitational forces in this system should have destroyed everything here billions of years ago. Yet somehow these worlds are not just surviving, but thriving." The third planet from the star caught their attention immediately. It was a world of blue and green, obviously supporting life despite the chaotic forces surrounding it. But the readings they were getting from the planet made no sense according to everything they knew about biology and physics. "The gravity there is nearly 3 times what most of our species can survive," reported the sensor operator, a young Cathara named Tikanel. "The atmosphere contains gases that would be toxic to most galactic life forms. The electromagnetic radiation from their star should have sterilized the surface long ago. Yet there are clear signs of not just life, but intelligent life," added Dr. Kailana, studying the data with growing excitement and terror. Studies technology, spacecraft moving between the planet and its moons. Captain Belran croaked nervously. In his command tank, what kind of beings could survive in such conditions? As if in answer to his question, their communications systems suddenly crackled to life. A voice speaking in no language they recognized came through their speakers. The tone was sharp, aggressive, and completely without fear. Dr. Valine worked frantically to run the signal through their translation computers. After several minutes, words began to form that they could understand. "Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted space. Identify yourselves and state your purpose, or you will be fired upon." The voice was calm, matter of fact, as if threatening to destroy a ship full of aliens was just another normal day. There was no curiosity about who they were or where they came from. Just a simple demand backed by obvious confidence in their ability to carry out the threat. Captain Belran realized they had found what they were looking for. Somewhere on that impossible world lived beings who had not just survived in conditions that would kill most galactic species instantly, but had thrived enough to develop technology and maintain a strong military presence. These were creatures that had evolved in chaos, beings that considered extreme danger to be normal life. If anyone in the galaxy might have ideas about how to fight something as alien and powerful as the shadow creature, it would be whatever lived on that deadly world. "Open a channel," Captain Belran ordered. "Let us hope they are willing to listen before they decide to destroy us." Captain Belran's throat sac trembled as he opened the communication channel. Through the viewports of Harmony's Edge, they could see the impossible world spinning below them. Cities of metal and glass covered its surface, and strange flying machines moved between the planet and its 3 moons. The electromagnetic storms that should have fried all technology seemed to have no effect on the inhabitants. "This is Captain Belran of the Galactic Council ship Harmony's Edge," he said carefully. "We come in peace, seeking knowledge that might help save our civilization from destruction." There was a long pause. Then the alien voice came back, still speaking in that calm, dangerous tone. "Galactic Council? Never heard of you? What kind of destruction are you talking about?" Dr. Valine worked quickly to establish a proper translation link. As the computer system synchronized, the alien voice became clear. It belonged to someone who sounded young but spoke with absolute authority. "My name is Captain Jake Morrison, commanding the Earth defense ship Defiant. You say you need help with some kind of threat. What makes you think we can help you win? Your own people cannot." Earth. The crew of Harmony's Edge had never heard that name before, but they quickly realized it must be what the inhabitants called their deadly world. Dr. Kailana studied the data streaming from their sensors, or bark-like. Skin crackling with amazement. "Captain Morrison," she said, taking over the communication. "We represent 7 species that have lived in peace for 3,000 years. But something is destroying our worlds, consuming entire star systems. Our weapons cannot touch it, and our science cannot explain it." Another pause. Then Morrison's voice came back, and this time there was interest in it. "Consuming star systems? It's not normal space pirate activity? Send us your data on this thing." Within minutes, the humans had absorbed all the information the Council had gathered about the shadow creature. The speed at which they processed the data amazed the Galactic crew. Most Council meetings took days to analyze such complex information. "Interesting problem," Morrison said finally. "This entity exists in multiple dimensions and feeds on life energy. Your people tried to fight it with standard energy weapons and conventional tactics. No wonder you got slaughtered." The casual way he talked about their greatest military defeat shocked the crew. To Morrison, the destruction of 200 ships and the death of thousands of beings was just another tactical problem to be solved. "We would like to meet with your leaders," Dr. Kailana said. "Perhaps we can work together to find a solution." "Sure," Morrison replied. "But fair warning, our world is not built for delicate alien visitors. Gravity alone will probably crush most of you. The air has oxygen levels that are toxic to a lot of species, and the weather down here can get violent. Without much notice, Captain Belran felt his water tank systems working harder to keep him comfortable just from listening to the description. "We have protective suits and gravity adjustment systems." "Your choice," Morrison said, "sending you coordinates for landing. Bay 7. Try not to break anything when you crash." The shuttle ride down to the planet's surface was terrifying. Atmospheric storms that surrounded the world tossed their small ship around like a toy. Lightning strikes that could have powered a small city hit their shields repeatedly. Gravity pulled at them with crushing force that made their bones ache. But somehow, humans lived in this chaos every day. Landing Bay 7 was carved into the side of a mountain that rose straight up from an ocean that crashed against its base with waves taller than buildings. The air outside their shuttle was filled with moisture and electrical energy that made their instruments spark and complain. Captain Jake Morrison was waiting for them when they emerged from their shuttle. He was shorter than most galactic species, but built like he was designed for heavy gravity and hard living. Skin was dark brown and marked with scars that told stories of surviving in dangerous places. His eyes were sharp and calculating, missing nothing as he studied the alien visitors. Behind him stood 2 other humans. Lieutenant Lisa Grant was pale-skinned with yellow hair pulled back in a tight knot. Her uniform was covered with equipment that looked designed for fighting rather than ceremony. Commander Alex Stone was tall and broad, with skin darker than Morrison's and arms that looked like they could bend metal bars. "Welcome to Earth," Morrison said, and his tone suggested he was not entirely sure they would survive the experience. "Hope you brought strong stomachs. This place tends to be rough on visitors." Dr. Kailana stepped forward, her protective suit worry, as it tried to compensate for the crushing gravity. "Captain Morrison, we are grateful that you agreed to meet with us. Our situation is desperate." "So you said," Morrison replied. "But before we talk about your problems, let me ask you something. How long has your galaxy been at peace?" 3,000 years, Dr. Kailana answered proudly. Morrison and His officers exchanged glances. Lieutenant Grant actually laughed, though the sound was not pleasant. 3,000 years without a real fight, she said. No wonder you don't know how to handle something dangerous. We are highly advanced, protested Dr. Valine. Our technology is sophisticated beyond anything your world could imagine. Commander Stone stepped forward, and his presence was intimidating even in the protective suits they wore. Advanced technology is nice, he said in a voice like grinding stone. But has it ever been tested against something that wants to kill you and eat your children? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Galactic crew realized that these humans were asking them something their peaceful civilization had never had to consider. All their technology, all their knowledge, had been developed in safety and comfort. It had never been tested against a real enemy. Morrison led them deeper into the mountain base. The corridors were lit with harsh white light and built for function. Rather than beauty, everything was designed to survive explosions, fires, earthquakes, and probably worse things that the humans dealt with regularly. Let me tell you about Earth, Morrison said as they walked. This planet has been trying to kill everything on it since life began. Volcanoes that can wipe out entire continents. Ice ages that freeze everything solid for millions of years. Asteroid impacts that block out the sun. Diseases that kill 90% of all living things. How do you survive? Whispered Dr. Kailana. Adapt, Lisa Grant answered simply. We learn to fight back, develop weapons and tactics that can handle anything the universe throws at us. We never assume that peace will last forever. They entered a large room where dozens of humans were, studying the data about the shadow creature. The speed and efficiency of their analysis was breathtaking. Charts and diagrams covered the walls, showing attack patterns, energy readings, tactical assessments that the Council's best minds had never considered. Dr. Rachel Kim looked up. From a computer terminal where she was analyzing the creature's dimensional phase patterns, she was small, even by human standards, but her eyes held an intelligence that burned like a laser. This entity is definitely extra-dimensional, she said without introduction. But it has weaknesses. Everything does. What kind of weaknesses? Dr. Valine asked eagerly. It phases between dimensions to avoid your weapons, Dr. Kim explained. But phasing takes energy and follows specific patterns. If you can predict where it will be when it phases back into normal space, you can hit it with kinetic weapons. Kinetic weapons? Dr. Kailana was confused. You mean physical projectiles? But those are primitive. Commander Stone laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused this time. Lady, there is nothing primitive about a chunk of metal moving at 20% of light speed. Sometimes the old ways work better than fancy energy beams. Morrison moved to a tactical display that showed Earth's orbital defenses. The Galactic crew stared in shock at what they saw. The humans had turned their entire star system into a fortress. Weapons platforms floated between the planets, each one carrying enough firepower to level mountains. Mobile defense stations patrolled the asteroid belt, ready to respond to any threat. You see, Morrison said, we've been preparing for something. Like your shadow creature, our whole history. Call it the universe trying to kill us. Our response has always been the same. Captain Belran asked. We make sure we're more dangerous than whatever is hunting us, Alex Stone answered. Lisa Grant pulled up tactical simulations on her computer. Your people tried to fight this thing with honor and proper military formation. Hey, that doesn't work. Against something that exists outside normal reality. You need to fight dirty. Fight dirty? Dr. Kailana did not understand the term. Use every advantage you can get, Morrison explained. Hit from multiple directions at once. Use weapons. It does not expect. Make it come to you instead of chasing it around. Most importantly, be willing to sacrifice anything to win. The humans spent the next several hours explaining concepts that the peaceful galactic species had never considered. Guerrilla warfare. Asymmetric tactics. The use of environmental hazards as weapons. How to turn an enemy's strengths against itself. Your shadow creature feeds on life energy, Dr. Kim said, so we starve it. We evacuate systems before it arrives and leave behind surprises. Nuclear weapons, antimatter bombs, gravity well generators. 3 weeks after first contact with Earth, the largest battle fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, but this time, things were different. Mixed in with the elegant ships of the 7 galactic species were the brutal, angular warships of humanity. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, Iron Hammer, and watched the final preparations through his viewports. The human ships looked nothing like the graceful vessels of their galactic allies. They were built like weapons themselves, covered in armor plating and bristling with gun turrets. Every line of their construction spoke of one purpose: to survive, combat, and destroy enemies. "All human ships report ready for combat," announced Lieutenant Lisa Grant from her tactical station. Around her, dozens of other humans worked at control panels that looked more like the inside of a tank than a spaceship bridge. Commander Alex Stone studied the sensor readings that showed the shadow creature feeding in the Proxima Centauri system. Target is currently draining the 4th planet. Energy readings are off the charts, but Dr. Kim's calculations show it should be vulnerable during its feeding phase. The plan they had developed over the past 3 weeks was unlike anything the galactic species had ever attempted. Instead of trying to fight the shadow creature directly, they would force it into a trap using tactics that the peaceful aliens found disturbing. Dr. Rachel Kim had spent every waking hour since the meeting on Earth analyzing the creature's behavior patterns. Her small frame was hunched over computer displays that showed dimensional mathematics too complex for most beings to understand. The entity phases between dimensions every 47 minutes during feeding, she announced over the fleet communication system. During the phase transition, it exists fully in our reality for exactly 12 seconds. That is our window. Admiral Curlin of the Queloth floated in his command tank aboard the Council ship Unity of Purpose, trying to understand the human battle plan. Everything about it went against 3,000 years of civilized warfare. There were no formation movements, no honorable challenges, no attempt to minimize casualties. Human fleet will engage in 30 minutes. Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. Remember, this thing has been having an easy time because it has never faced anyone willing to fight dirty. Today we changed that. The shadow creature was exactly where Dr. Kim had predicted it would be. It floated between the dead planets of Proxima Centauri, its dark tendrils reaching out to drain the last energy from the system's dying worlds. When the combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace, the creature turned toward them with what might have been amusement. It had faced Galactic fleets before. They always attacked the same way, with energy weapons and predictable tactics. This time would be no different, but as the creature began to phase shift to avoid the incoming weapons fire, something unexpected happened. The human ships did not fire energy beams. Instead, they launched thousands of small objects that moved too fast for sensors to track properly. "Kinetic projectiles away," Lisa Grant announced calmly. "Impact in 15 seconds?" Shadow creature tried to phase into another dimension to avoid the attack. But Dr. Kim had calculated exactly where it would reappear, as it materialized. 12 seconds later, chunks of metal moving at incredible speed slammed into its core. For the first time in its existence, the shadow creature felt pain. The sound it made was unlike anything any of the galactic species had heard before. It was a scream that existed in multiple dimensions, a cry of rage and surprise that made every being in the fleet feel sick with terror. But the humans were not finished. "Deploy resonance field generators," Commander Stone ordered. Around the battle zone, dozens of small human devices activated, creating an energy field that made the space around the shadow creature unstable. The creature tried to phase shift again, but the resonance field trapped it in normal space. 4. The first time, it was truly vulnerable to conventional weapons. "All ships open fire," Morrison commanded. What followed was not a battle in any sense that the galactic species understood. It was controlled violence on a scale that shocked even the creature they were fighting. Human ships fired everything they had: nuclear missiles, antimatter torpedoes, gravity bombs, and weapons that the galactic allies did not even have names. 4. The shadow creature fought back with desperate fury, sending out tendrils of dark energy that could drain the life from anything they touched. 3 human ships were caught by the tendrils and went dark, their crews instantly killed. But instead of retreating, the remaining human ships pressed their attack even harder. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, reported the damage control officer on Morrison's ship. Losing atmosphere fast. Seal the damaged sections and keep firing, Morrison replied without emotion. To him, losing part of his ship was just another problem to solve. Dr. Kim worked frantically at her instruments as the battle raged around them. The resonance field is destabilizing, she announced. The creature is adapting faster than predicted. We have maybe 5 more minutes before it breaks free. Then we finish this now, Commander Stone said. He turned to his weapons officer, a scarred human woman named Betty Walsh. Prepare the planet. Cracker. The Galactic ships pulled back as the human flagship began charging its most powerful weapon. The energy readings from the device were so extreme that nearby space began to warp and twist. The shadow creature seemed to sense what was coming. Its attacks became more frenzied, more desperate. Dark tendrils lashed out in all directions, trying to break through the human ships to escape the trap. But Morrison had saved one final surprise. Now, he said quietly into his communicator, from the asteroid belt at the edge of the system, massive explosions lit up space. The humans had spent weeks placing nuclear charges throughout the region, turning the entire area into a minefield. As the shadow creature tried to retreat, it found itself trapped between the resonance field generators and a wall of atomic fire. You like to feed on energy? Morrison said, speaking directly to the creature through the communication system. Here's all you can eat. The planet cracker fired. The beam that erupted from the human flagship was not just a weapon. It was focused destruction on a level that made stars look dim. It punched through the shadow creature's defenses, like they were made of paper, striking directly into its core. The creature's death scream shattered windows on ships thousands of kilometers away. Its dark form began to collapse inward, the dimensional energies that held it together finally breaking down under the assault. But even in death, it tried to take its enemies with it. Waves of chaotic energy erupted from its collapsing form, threatening to tear apart every ship in the battle zone. All ships emergency jump to hyperspace, Admiral Curlin ordered frantically. But Morrison had one more card to play. Negative, he said calmly. We stay and finish this. The human ships formed a protective wall around their galactic allies, using their own hulls to absorb the creature's final attack. Ship after ship was battered by energies that could crack planets. But they held their positions. When the chaos finally ended, 47 human ships had been destroyed or crippled. But the shadow creature was gone. Its dark energies scattered harmlessly across space. In the silence that followed, Admiral Curlin sent a message to the entire fleet that would be remembered for generations. The Deathworlders have shown us what we had forgotten. Sometimes, to preserve life, you must be willing to embrace death. Captain Morrison, his ship badly damaged, but still functional, responded with typical human directness. The universe is a dangerous place, Admiral, but now it knows that we are more dangerous. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The shadow creature was dead, destroyed by beings who refused to accept defeat. The age of galactic peace was over. But it had been replaced by something better, the knowledge that there were those willing to fight for it. On Earth, Commander, Stone reviewed the battle reports and began planning improvements for next time, because there would be a next time. The universe was full of dangers. Humanity was ready for all of them. The Deathworlders had announced themselves to the galaxy. Nothing would ever be the same again. Dr. Kim, working late in her laboratory, detected something that made her smile. Deep space sensors were picking up energy signatures from other regions beyond the galactic rim. Ancient things that had slumbered for eons were stirring. Drawn by the psychic scream of the shadow creature's death, they were coming to investigate what had killed their kind. And when they arrived, they would find a galaxy that was no longer defenseless. They would find humanity waiting for them. The silent galaxy had found its voice. And it was the sound of weapons charging for battle.